The photograph landed on the refreshment table with a slap that made the punch bowl tremble. I watched from across the fellowship hall as my daughter Cassandra held court among the women's ministry group. Her perfectly manicured finger jabbing at my face in that grainy mugshot. The room contracted around me, oxygen suddenly scarce. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story today. I am curious, what part of the world are you tuning in from? Drop your city in the comments below. All right, let us dive into what happened to me. My fingers crushed the paper plate I'd been holding, coffee-stained napkin and all. The remnants of lemon cake crumbled between my knuckles as I forced my feet to move forward, each step across that linoleum floor feeling like wading through concrete. Sister Patricia's mouth formed a perfect O of shock. Deacon Williams turned away completely, suddenly fascinated by the bulletin board announcing next week's bake sale. The whispers started before I was halfway across the room. They rippled outward from Cassandra's circle like poison spreading through water. I caught fragments. 30 years ago? Never told us. Criminal record. Each phrase a barb that caught in my chest. My daughter's eyes met mine. No warmth there. No recognition of the woman who'd sat up with her through colic, through nightmares, through every fever and heartbreak. Just cold satisfaction, like she'd been waiting years to detonate this particular bomb in public. Mom. She didn't even flinch when she said it. I was just explaining to everyone why you've been so secretive about your past. I dropped the crushed plate on the nearest table. My purse slipped from my shoulder, but I caught it, gripping the leather straps so tightly my joints ached. The photograph stared up at me, that haunted 28-year-old face I barely recognized anymore, booking number stark across the bottom. In my office. Pastor Theodore's voice cut through the murmurs. He stood in the doorway of the administrative wing, his expression unreadable but his posture rigid. Now. The crowd parted. I walked that gauntlet alone, feeling 37 pairs of eyes drilling into my spine. Behind me, Cassandra's voice rose again, saccharine sweet and sharp as a blade. I just thought the congregation had a right to know who they've been trusting with the children's ministry. My hand found the doorframe of Pastor Theodore's office. I gripped it hard enough to leave impressions in the wood. Story Part 2. I stepped into the office before my knees could give out. The door clicked shut behind me, muffling the hive of voices still buzzing in the fellowship hall. My reflection caught in the window glass. Sweat beading at my temples, gray curls falling from the neat bun I'd pinned that morning. I looked exactly like what Cassandra wanted them all to see. Guilty. Pastor Theodore moved past me without a word. His shoes squeaked against the polished floor as he crossed to his desk. The sound unnaturally loud in the silence. He didn't sit. Instead, he stood with his back to me, hands clasped behind his waist, staring at the cross mounted on the wall above his filing cabinet. The air conditioning kicked on. Cold air blasted from the vent directly overhead, raising goosebumps along my arms. I wrapped them around myself, still clutching my purse against my ribs like body armor. 34 years. His voice came out flat, measured. You've been a member of this church for 34 years. I opened my mouth, closed it. My tongue felt thick and useless. He turned, finally meeting my eyes. Deep lines creased his forehead, pulling his bushy eyebrows into a severe V. I need to know if what she said is true. My throat constricted. I forced myself to nod once, a sharp jerk of my chin. His jaw tightened. He lowered himself into his chair with deliberate slowness, the leather creaking under his weight. A manila folder sat on his desk blotter. church letterhead visible on the top document. His fingers drummed once against the armrest before going still. Sit. I sank into the visitor's chair. The seat was too low, putting me at eye level with his desk nameplate. I'd sat in this same chair dozens of times over the years, discussing Sunday school curriculum, planning mission trips, organizing the Christmas pageant. Now it felt like an interrogation room. He pulled a notepad from his drawer and clicked a pen. The mechanical sound made me flinch. "What were you convicted of?" The words scraped my throat coming out. "Check fraud, forgery." His pen scratched across paper. I watched my crimes become official record again, ink bleeding into the page. My stomach twisted. "How long were you incarcerated?" 18 months. Got out in 14 for good behavior." More scratching. He didn't look up. "And this was when?" 33 years ago." My voice cracked. I cleared it, forced strength back into the words. "March of 1991. The pen stopped. He set it down carefully, aligning it parallel to the notepad's edge. When he looked up, his expression had shifted into something I couldn't read. Not quite anger, not quite disappointment. Something harder. "Did you disclose this when you applied to work with the children's ministry?" My silence was answer enough. He exhaled through his nose, a long, controlled breath. His fingers found the folder on his desk, tapping its edge. "The board requires background checks for all youth workers. You signed the consent form yourself." "I know." The words barely made it past my lips. The check came back clean. He opened the folder now, scanning the top page. No criminal record listed. My heart hammered. I gripped the armrests, feeling the wood grain bite into my palms. I had it expunged, paid a lawyer 7 years after my release, thought. I stopped, swallowed hard. Thought I'd finally left it behind. He closed the folder with a soft thump. The sound felt final, like a gavel. Outside the door, footsteps hurried past. Voices rose and fell in urgent whispers. I pictured them all out there. Deacon Miller, Sister Eunice, the Hendersons, everyone I'd served alongside for over 3 decades. All of them dissecting my past, rewriting every memory of me through this new, stained lens. Pastor Theodore leaned back in his chair. The leather groaned. He steepled his fingers beneath his chin, studying me with those sharp brown eyes that had counseled me through my divorce, through my mother's death, through every crisis that had brought me to his office seeking guidance. "I'm going to have to suspend you from all ministry activities." His words landed like stones in still water. "Pending a full board review." My chest seized. I gripped my purse tighter, nails digging crescents into the leather. The room tilted slightly, walls pressing closer. "Theodore, Pastor, please. Those children?" My voice broke. I thought of little Emma, who'd finally opened up about her parents' divorce last week. Of Marcus, who'd memorized all 12 disciples and couldn't wait to recite them. Of the Christmas program we'd been rehearsing for months. He raised one hand, cutting me off. "It's not my decision alone. The board meets Thursday night. Until then, you're not to have any contact with the youth programs." He paused, and something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or pity. "I'm sorry, Joy. I have to protect the church." I stood. My legs shook but held. The purse strap cut into my shoulder as I adjusted it, using the motion to hide how badly my hands were trembling. The door handle felt ice cold under my palm. I pulled it open, and the wall of sound hit me immediately. Conversation that died the instant I appeared. Faces swiveled toward me in unison, expressions ranging from shock to poorly concealed satisfaction. Cassandra stood at the center of her group, arms crossed, chin lifted. Our eyes met across the fellowship hall. She smiled. Continuation. The smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did when she looked at me these days. I turned away, forcing my feet to move toward the exit. Each step felt like wading through mud. The distance to those double doors stretched impossibly far. Someone coughed. Another person shifted in their chair, the wood scraping against linoleum with a sound that echoed through the sudden silence. My heels clicked too loudly on the floor. Click, click, click. Each impact sent vibrations up through my knees. I always knew something was off about her. The whisper came from my left, barely audible but meant to be heard. I kept my eyes forward, jaw clenched so tight my molars ached. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, that persistent buzz I'd never noticed before. Now it seemed deafening. My vision tunneled, focusing only on those cream-colored doors with their silver push bars. 20 more feet. 15. A hand touched my elbow. I flinched, pulling away before I could stop myself. Joy, wait. Patricia's voice, soft and uncertain. She'd been my prayer partner for 3 years. We'd met every Tuesday morning at 6 before her shift at the hospital. She'd held my hand when I'd sobbed over Cassandra's teenage rebellion, when the divorce papers had arrived, when my mother had taken her last breath in that sterile hospice room. I stopped but didn't turn around. My shoulder blades pressed together, spine rigid as iron. Is it true? Patricia's fingers twisted together in front of her floral dress. I could see her reflection in the glass of a bulletin board, face pale, eyes wide. About the conviction? The word hung in the air between us like smoke. I watched her reflection, watched her take a small step backward even as she waited for my answer. It was 30 years ago. My voice came out flat, empty. I was barely older than Cassandra is now. Patricia's mouth opened, closed. Her hands dropped to her sides. She nodded once, a jerky motion, then retreated into the cluster of women near the coffee station. They absorbed her immediately, heads bending together, whispers rising like steam. I pushed through the doors. The evening air hit my face, warm and thick with humidity. August in Atlanta. The heat never let up, even after sunset. Cicadas screamed from the oak trees lining the parking lot. Their sound filled the spaces where voices and judgment had been just seconds before. My car sat alone in the far corner, under a broken street lamp. I'd parked there out of habit, leaving the closer spots for the elderly members, for parents with small children. The white lines of empty spaces mocked me as I crossed the asphalt. Everyone else had clustered near the entrance. Everyone else belonged. The key fob slipped in my sweat-slick palm. I caught it before it hit the ground, squeezed it hard enough to feel the metal edges bite into my skin. The car beeped twice, locks disengaging with a mechanical click that sounded too cheerful. Inside, I pulled the door shut and immediately locked it again. The click of the locks engaging sent a wave of relief through my chest. Separate, protected, alone. My hands found the steering wheel and gripped it. The leather was hot from sitting in the sun all day, burning against my palms. I didn't let go. The pain felt grounding, real, when everything else seemed to be dissolving. The church building loomed in my rearview mirror, red brick and white columns, stained glass windows glowing from within. 22 years I'd been a member. 22 years of potlucks and revivals, of volunteering and tithing, of showing up every Sunday morning and Wednesday evening without fail. Of rebuilding my life after prison, proving I was more than my worst mistake. Gone. All of it gone because my daughter had decided to weaponize my past. The engine turned over when I twisted the key. Cold air blasted from the vents, slowly pushing out the accumulated heat. I shifted into reverse, but didn't move yet. My foot stayed pressed on the brake. Through the passenger window, I could see people beginning to trickle out of the fellowship hall. They moved in groups, protective clusters that excluded me even from this distance. Gerald Harrison had his arm around his wife Deborah's shoulders. Linda Chen walked between two other women whose names I couldn't remember. They all looked so normal, so untouched by scandal. Cassandra emerged last, flanked by her friends. She threw her head back, laughing at something one of them said. The sound didn't carry across the parking lot, but I could see the motion, the way her shoulders shook, the bright flash of her teeth. She looked lighter somehow, unburdened. She'd always been good at that, making her pain into someone else's problem. My phone buzzed in my purse. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. Text messages lighting up the screen. I didn't need to look to know what they'd say. The prayer chain would be on fire tonight, requests for guidance and discernment, spreading my shame through the congregation like wildfire. I released the brake and let the car roll backward. The motion was smooth, controlled. I'd done this thousands of times. Muscle memory took over where thought failed. Shift, turn, accelerate. The parking lot exit approached, then passed. The church disappeared behind me. The steering wheel felt slick under my palms as I drove through neighborhoods I'd known for 30 years. Sweat gathered at my temples despite the air conditioning. Every turn brought familiar landmarks. The corner store where I used to buy Cassandra ice cream after school. The park where she'd scraped her knee learning to ride a bike. The library where we'd spent countless Saturday mornings. I pulled into my driveway 15 minutes later. The house stood dark against the evening sky. No porch light left burning. I'd forgotten to turn it on before leaving for church that morning, back when I still believed the day might end differently. My keys jangled as I approached the front door. The sound seemed too loud in the quiet street. Inside, I dropped my purse on the entryway table and stood in the darkness, listening to the house settle around me. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. A faucet dripped somewhere upstairs. The guest bathroom, probably. I'd been meaning to fix that for weeks. The living room curtains hung open. I moved through the shadows to close them, then stopped. Headlights swept across the windows. A car slowed in front of my house. My stomach clenched. The vehicle idled at the curb for several seconds before continuing down the street. I yanked the curtain shut anyway. In the kitchen, I filled a glass with water from the tap and drank it standing at the sink. The liquid was cold going down, but did nothing to ease the tightness in my throat. I set the glass down too hard. It clinked against the stainless steel, a sharp sound that made me flinch. My phone buzzed again. I pulled it from my pocket and stared at the screen. 14 new messages. The preview lines were all I needed to see. Praying for you during this difficult time. If there's anything you need, we should talk about what happened. I deleted them without reading further. My finger moved automatically, swiping left, tapping the trash icon, moving to the next message. Delete, delete, delete. The doorbell rang. My hand froze mid-swipe. The phone's screen cast a pale glow across my face in the darkened kitchen. I held my breath, listening. Maybe they'd think no one was home. Maybe they'd leave. The doorbell rang again. 3 quick pulses. I moved through the kitchen, my footsteps silent on the tile floor. Through the front window's edge, I could see a figure on the porch. Female, shorter than me. The porch light from next door provided just enough illumination to make out features. Rhonda Davis, the assistant pastor's wife. She pressed the doorbell a 3rd time. Her finger stayed on the button longer, the chime echoing through the house like an alarm. I watched her shift her weight from foot to foot, clutching a covered dish against her chest. Casserole, or maybe a pie. The universal currency of Christian sympathy. Joy, I know you're in there. I saw your car pull up. My jaw clenched. I stepped away from the window. Rhonda knocked now, her knuckles rapping against the wood. We need to talk about Cassandra, about what she said. The covered dish appeared in the window next to the door. She pressed it against the glass, as if the sight of food might lure me out. I'm not leaving until you open this door. I crossed the entryway in 4 quick strides and threw the deadbolt. The door swung inward. Rhonda stumbled slightly, caught off guard despite her ultimatum. What do you want? She recovered quickly, straightening her spine and lifting the dish higher. I brought dinner, chicken and rice, your favorite. I'm not hungry. Joy, please, it's late, I'm tired. I started to close the door. Rhonda's hand shot out, palm flat against the wood, holding it open. Her eyes met mine, and something hard glinted in them. Not sympathy, not concern, curiosity. Is it true? She asked. What Cassandra said about the embezzlement? The word hung between us like a physical thing. I felt my fingers dig into the door's edge, nails scraping against paint. Get your hand off my door. Because if it's true, the church board needs to know. Pastor Michael has been talking about making you treasurer again, and if there's any history of financial impropriety, I shoved the door. Hard. It caught Rhonda's fingers, and she yelped, jerking her hand back. The casserole dish tilted. She fumbled with it, trying to keep it level, but the aluminum foil covering slipped. Rice and chicken spilled down her blouse, leaving greasy stains across the fabric. You can't just ignore this. Her voice rose, sharp and shrill. Everyone's talking about it. Gerald Harrison says we have a right to know if... I slammed the door. The deadbolt clicked into place. My hands shook as I engaged the chain lock for good measure. Through the door, I heard Rhonda's muffled voice. This isn't over, Joy. The truth always comes out. Her footsteps retreated down the porch steps. A car door opened and closed. An engine started. Only when the sound faded completely did I let my back slide down the door until I sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest. The house creaked around me. Outside, a dog barked. A car passed. Normal sounds from a normal Sunday evening in a normal neighborhood. Except nothing was normal anymore. My phone buzzed against the kitchen counter. The vibration rattled through the silence, harsh and insistent. I pushed myself up from the floor, my knees protesting the movement. The screen lit up with text notifications. 7, 9, 12. Is this true? Call me ASAP. We need to talk about what we heard. I didn't recognize half the numbers. The ones I did made my stomach clench. Women from the quilting circle, members of the finance committee. People I'd known for 15 years, reduced to strangers by my daughter's poison. The phone buzzed again. This time a call. The name that appeared made me freeze. Reverend Michael Townsend. My thumb hovered over the decline button. The buzzing continued, drilling into my skull. I answered. Joy. His voice carried that careful tone pastors use when someone's dying. I think we should meet. Tomorrow. Your office. Actually, I was hoping tonight. There are concerns that have been brought to my attention and... I hung up, set the phone face down on the counter, pressed both palms against the cool granite, and counted my breaths. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. The technique didn't work. My heart hammered against my ribs anyway. Through the kitchen window, I saw headlights sweep across my driveway. A dark sedan pulled in behind my Honda. The driver's door opened, and a woman in a burgundy pantsuit stepped out. Even in the dim porch light, I recognized Patricia Chen, the church secretary. She moved with quick, efficient steps toward my front door. I stayed in the kitchen. Let her knock. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the house. "Joy, I know you're home. Your car's here?" Another knock, louder. "The Reverend asked me to check on you. He's worried." I crossed to the sink, turned on the faucet. Let the water run over my hands until they went numb from the cold. Patricia's shadow moved across the living room window. She was trying to peer through the blinds. "I brought copies of the church bylaws," she called through the door. "Section 12 deals with financial oversight and background disclosures for anyone handling church funds. I thought you might want to review them." The shadow disappeared. Her heels clicked back down the porch steps. But the sedan didn't leave. Through the kitchen window, I watched her sitting in the driver's seat, phone pressed to her ear. The call lasted 3 minutes. When she finally backed out of the driveway, another car was already turning onto my street. This one I didn't recognize. A white pickup truck, rust eating through the wheel wells. It parked on the street instead of the driveway. A man climbed out, tall and heavy-set, wearing coveralls with oil stains. He lit a cigarette, leaned against the truck bed, and stared at my house. I moved away from the window, back to the living room. Checked all the locks again. Windows, doors. The sliding glass that led to the back patio. My phone erupted with new messages. The group chat for the women's ministry. Usually it was full of prayer requests and casserole recipes. Now it was just my name, repeated in different configurations. Has anyone talked to Joy? Should we organize an intervention? What if she tries to leave town? I scrolled through the messages, watching my reputation dissolve in real time. Someone had posted a link to a news article from 12 years ago. The headline was visible even in the preview. "Local accountant charged with embezzlement." My face stared back at me from the thumbnail photo. Younger, terrified, being led out of an office building in handcuffs. The comments multiplied beneath the link. "I can't believe she never told us. We trusted her with the building fund." "What else is she hiding?" The doorbell rang again, then knocking, someone calling my name. I couldn't tell who anymore. The voices blended together, a chorus of accusation and false concern. I killed the lights, unplugged the lamps, sat in the darkness of my living room with my phone's glow the only illumination. Outside, car doors opened and closed. Footsteps crunched across gravel. Shadows moved past windows. Someone tried the back door. The handle rattled. I stood, moved silently through the kitchen. The security light had triggered, flooding the patio with harsh white light. A figure pressed against the glass, hands cupped around their face to see inside. I grabbed the baseball bat from the coat closet. Solid wood, weighted perfectly in my hands, moved to the door. The figure jumped back when they saw me. Hands raised. "It's just me," a male voice. "Thomas, from the deacon board. We're worried about you." I didn't lower the bat. Through the glass, I could see 2 other people behind him, all of them staring, all of them waiting for me to crack. "Leave." My voice came out steady, cold. "We just want to help. Now." Thomas backed away, hands still raised. He said something to the others. They retreated across the lawn, but only to the property line. They stood in the neighbor's yard, 3 silhouettes against the street light, watching my house like sentries. The white pickup was still parked on the street. The man had finished his cigarette and lit another. He'd been joined by someone in a Honda. They sat with windows down, talking. Occasionally, one would glance toward my house. I counted 6 vehicles within view. 6 sets of witnesses to my shame. My phone showed 43 unread messages now. The number kept climbing. I pulled every curtain closed, sealing myself in. The fabric muffled the voices outside, but couldn't silence them completely. My throat burned from dehydration. I'd drunk nothing since morning coffee, 14 hours ago. The kitchen tap ran cold over my cupped hands. I drank straight from the stream, water spilling down my chin and neck, soaking my collar. The doorbell rang. 3 sharp chimes that made me flinch, water spraying across the counter. I turned off the tap and waited. It rang again. Then knocking. Polite at first, then insistent. Fists pounding against wood. "We know you're in there!" A woman's voice, high and strained. Not anyone I recognized. I moved to the front hallway and looked through the peephole. 5 women clustered on my porch. The one in front wore a floral dress and held a casserole dish covered in foil. Behind her stood others with covered plates, grocery bags, their faces pinched with what they probably thought looked like concern. "Joy, please!" The woman with the casserole knocked again. "We brought food. We want to pray with you." Pray. The word made something twist in my chest. I pressed my forehead against the door, feeling the vibrations of their knocking travel through the wood into my skull. "My sister was in prison," another voice called out. "She found redemption. You can too." My fingers curled into fists. The bat still leaned against the wall where I'd left it. I grabbed it again, hefted its weight, moved to the living room window and rapped the barrel hard against the glass. The sound cracked through the night. The women on the porch screamed. One dropped her dish, the crash of shattering ceramic, the splatter of something wet against concrete. They stumbled backward down the steps, clutching each other, scrambling toward the sidewalk. I hit the window again, harder. The glass shuddered in its frame, but held. "She's violent!" someone shrieked. "Call someone!" They scattered to their cars, engines starting, tires squealing, but within minutes, more arrived. A van pulled up, and 7 people climbed out. They formed a circle on the sidewalk in front of my house, joined hands, and began to sing. Hymns I'd known since childhood, now twisted into weapons. Their voices rose in practiced harmony, loud enough to wake the entire block. I stood at the window, watching. My reflection stared back, wild-eyed, hair escaping its bun, collar still damp. I looked like exactly what they thought I was. Something dangerous. Something broken. My phone vibrated continuously now, a steady pulse against the coffee table. I picked it up with shaking hands. 79 messages. The most recent were from numbers I didn't recognize. "Your daughter is so brave for speaking out." "We're praying the demons leave your house." "Criminals shouldn't be allowed in church." The singers outside shifted into "Amazing Grace." The irony burned like acid in my throat. I opened my text thread with Gerald. His last message, sent 2 hours ago. "Don't do anything stupid. This will blow over." I typed, "They're outside my house, singing." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Want me to come over?" My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to say yes. Wanted someone, anyone, on my side. But Gerald showing up would just feed the fire. Give them more to talk about, more proof that I was exactly what they imagined. "No, stay away." I set the phone face down and walked to the bathroom. Turned on the shower, let steam fill the small space until the mirror fogged completely. I stripped off my damp clothes and stepped under the spray, scalding hot, turning my skin pink. Scrubbed until my arms ached. But I couldn't wash off their stares, couldn't rinse away their judgment. The singing continued outside, muffled by walls and water, but relentless. When I emerged, wrapped in my robe with my hair dripping, the house had gone quiet. Too quiet. I crept to the living room window and peered through a gap in the curtains. They'd multiplied. At least 20 people now stood in my yard, on the sidewalk, spilling into the street. Someone had brought battery-powered lanterns. Their faces glowed orange in the artificial light, mouths moving in synchronized prayer. A man I'd never seen held up a phone, filming, recording my house, my darkened windows, creating evidence of my isolation. A police cruiser rolled past slowly, lights off. It paused at the corner. The officer inside surveyed the crowd, but didn't stop, didn't intervene. Just continued down the street and disappeared around the bend. I was alone, completely, utterly alone. My legs gave out. I sank to the floor, back against the wall beneath the window, and pulled my knees to my chest. Above me, the crowd's murmuring prayers created a constant drone, like insects, like static, like the sound of my entire life disintegrating. The doorbell rang at 6:47 a.m. I knew the exact time because I'd been staring at the ceiling all night, watching the digital clock's numbers change with mechanical precision. My body ached as I pushed myself up from the couch where I'd finally collapsed around 4. Every joint protested. I shuffled to the door, still wearing yesterday's robe, my hair a matted mess against my skull. Through the peephole, I saw a woman in a dark suit holding a tablet, a sedan idling at the curb behind her. I cracked the door open, keeping the chain engaged. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm Patricia Reeves from County Social Services." My stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. The tablet screen glowed blue in the early morning dimness, official-looking forms already loaded and waiting. "We received multiple calls yesterday regarding unsafe living conditions and potential mental health concerns at this address." "There's nothing unsafe here." My voice came out rough, unused. "My daughter, she lied about—" Patricia held up one manicured hand. "I'm required to conduct a wellness check and home inspection. You can cooperate voluntarily, or I can return with law enforcement and a court order." She delivered the words with practiced efficiency, no malice, no sympathy. Just procedure. I was procedure now. A box to check, a form to complete. I unlatched the chain. Patricia moved through my house like a detective at a crime scene, photographing everything with her tablet. The unwashed dishes in my sink. The pile of mail I hadn't opened in 3 weeks. My unmade bed. The expired milk in the refrigerator. She typed notes constantly, her fingers dancing across the screen with damning speed. In the bathroom, she photographed my pill bottles. Blood pressure medication, nothing more, but she documented each one, recording dosages and refill dates. She opened my medicine cabinet, counted my remaining pills, compared the numbers to the prescription dates. "Mrs. Johnson, when's the last time you ate a full meal?" I couldn't remember. Yesterday? The day before? Time had become elastic, meaningless. "I eat when I'm hungry." Patricia's eyes swept over me, cataloging my weight loss, the loose fit of my robe, the hollows beneath my cheekbones. More typing, more documentation, more evidence of my inadequacy. She finished her inspection 40 minutes later, standing in my living room with her tablet clutched against her chest like a shield. "I'm recommending a follow-up visit in 2 weeks. In the meantime, I'm leaving you information about counseling services and meal assistance programs." She pulled pamphlets from her bag, colorful trifolds advertising help for the helpless. "Someone will be in contact." The sedan pulled away at 7:34 a.m. I locked the door and leaned against it, sliding down until I sat on the floor. The pamphlets spilled from my hands, scattering across the hardwood like accusations. My phone buzzed, A text from an unknown number. Saw the news. You should be ashamed. People like you don't belong in decent neighborhoods. Another buzz. Another number. Criminal trash. Another. Hope they lock you up where you belong. I turned the phone off completely this time, removing the battery, disconnecting myself from the digital firing squad. But I couldn't disconnect from the knock that came at 9:15 a.m. Through the peephole, a man in his 30s wearing khakis and a polo shirt with a company logo I didn't recognize. He held a clipboard and wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Johnson, I'm Todd Mitchell from the Homeowners Association. We need to discuss several violations. I didn't open the door. Your lawn hasn't been maintained in over 3 weeks. You've received multiple citations. Additionally, we've had complaints about disturbances at this property. I didn't cause any disturbances. Those people came here. The HOA bylaws clearly state that residents are responsible for any activities that disrupt neighborhood peace, regardless of who initiates them. He consulted his clipboard, flipping through pages. You're currently in violation of sections 3.2, 4.7, and 8.1. If these issues aren't resolved within 10 days, we'll be forced to begin fining procedures. Initial fine is $500, increasing by $200 per week thereafter. He slid a manila envelope under my door and walked away, his shoes clicking efficiently against my porch steps. Inside the envelope, a cease and desist letter, violation notices printed on official letterhead, a breakdown of potential fines that could reach thousands, my address, my name, my failure documented in triplicate. I left the papers on the floor and walked to the kitchen. Opened the refrigerator. The expired milk, some wilted lettuce, a container of something that might have once been soup. Patricia's assessment had been accurate. I was failing at the basic mechanics of survival. The doorbell rang again at 11:03 a.m. I didn't move, didn't look, pressed my palms against the cool granite countertop, and stood there, frozen, while whoever it was rang twice more, then pounded on the door with increasing aggression. Joy Johnson, this is Channel 7 News. We'd like to give you an opportunity to tell your side of the story. More pounding. A woman's voice, bright and practiced, the kind of voice that introduced tragedies with appropriate gravitas before transitioning smoothly to weather reports. Mrs. Johnson, just a few questions. Is it true you've been harassing church members? Can you comment on your daughter's allegations? I slid down the cabinets and sat on the kitchen floor, my spine against the wood, my breathing shallow. Above me, the refrigerator hummed. Outside, the reporter continued shouting questions through my door, each one a fresh wound. When she finally left, I crawled to the living room and pulled myself onto the couch. My whole body trembled. Not fear anymore, something deeper. Cellular exhaustion, the complete depletion of whatever reserves keep humans functional. The mail slot clattered. An envelope dropped onto my floor, landing among the scattered pamphlets and HOA documents. I stared at it for 10 minutes before forcing myself to retrieve it. Plain white envelope, my name and address written in careful cursive. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was large, pressed hard enough to indent the page. Get out. You're not wanted here. We know what you are. My hands didn't shake anymore. They'd moved beyond shaking into something else, a numbness that spread up my arms, into my chest, a protective anesthesia my body administered to prevent complete shutdown. I added the note to the pile of papers accumulating on my floor. A sedimentary layer of accusation, one stratum for each new attack. 763521. The church doors stood ahead of me, 15 concrete steps rising toward them like a judicial bench. Sunday morning light cut sharp angles across the building's limestone face, turning it into a fortress of judgment. Cars filled the parking lot, the early service crowd already inside, singing hymns I could faintly hear through the walls. My legs moved without conscious instruction, carrying me up those steps. Each one cost something. My knees protested. My heart slammed against my ribs. The threatening letter was folded in my coat pocket, a square of poison pressed against my side. I'd spent 3 days deciding. 3 days watching my phone ring with unknown numbers, watching shadows pass my windows, jumping at every sound. The choice crystallized somewhere in the sleepless hours before dawn. Face this congregation or spend the rest of my life hiding. The sanctuary doors swung open under my palms, heavy oak, smooth from decades of use. The singing stopped. 200 faces turned toward me like a choreographed movement, a synchronized recoil. The organist's hands froze above the keys, the final notes hanging in the air before dying. Gerald Harrison stood at the pulpit, mid-gesture, his arm extended toward the choir. His face went through a sequence of expressions: surprise, confusion, hardening resolve. He lowered his arm slowly. "Service is in session," he said, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "I'll have to ask you to. I'm here to worship." My voice came out stronger than I felt. "Same as everyone else." I moved down the center aisle. The congregation shifted away from me like water parting around a stone. Parents pulled children closer. Women clutched purses. A man in the third row stood up, his body language screaming confrontation. His wife grabbed his sleeve, whispered something sharp. My usual pew, fourth row, right side, sat empty. The family who normally occupied it had scattered to other seats. I slid in, the wood creaking under my weight. My hands gripped the pew in front of me, knuckles white. Gerald cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. "Let us continue with—" "She shouldn't be here." A woman's voice from the left side, shrill enough to carry. "After what she did?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Agreement, outrage, a growing wave of collective righteousness. I kept my eyes forward, watching Gerald's face cycle through pastoral concern and territorial aggression. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," he began. "No." I stayed seated, my spine rigid. "I've been a member here for 12 years. I've committed no crime. I'm not leaving." The side door opened. My daughter walked in, her phone already raised, recording. Behind her, a man with a professional camera followed. The news crew had found its way inside. The sanctuary exploded into chaos. People shouted. Some stood, creating a wall of bodies between me and the altar. Others grabbed phones, documenting this moment for social media immortality. Gerald's voice rose above the din, calling for order, for calm, for Christian charity that none of them felt. A hand grabbed my shoulder from behind. Hard. Fingers digging in. I twisted away and stood, coming face to face with 3 men from the deacon board. Their expressions held nothing of mercy. "You need to leave. Now." The speaker was Travis Burke, owner of the hardware store on Main Street. I'd bought paint from him last month. He'd smiled and asked about my garden. "I have every right." "You're disturbing the peace, causing a scene." His hand moved toward my arm. I stepped back into the pew, cornered. The men advanced. Behind them, the crowd had formed a semicircle, phones raised, documenting my humiliation. My daughter stood on a pew to get a better angle, her face alight with vindication. The camera crew pushed closer. The reporter, same woman who'd ambushed me at home, thrust a microphone toward the unfolding confrontation. "Mrs. Johnson, why did you come here today? Are you trying to intimidate your accusers?" Gerald descended from the pulpit, moving through the crowd. His face had settled into disappointment, the universal expression of leaders dealing with problems they wished would simply vanish. He reached the deacons, placed a hand on Travis's shoulder. "Let me handle this." His voice dropped low, meant only for us, but the microphone caught it anyway. "Joy, this isn't the time or place. You're upsetting people, frightening them." Something snapped in my chest. A wire pulled too tight, finally breaking. I pushed past Travis, stumbling into the aisle. Bodies closed in from both sides, not touching, not yet, but forming a human corridor that funneled me backward toward the exit. "I'm not the criminal here!" The words tore out of me, raw and desperate. "I never was! Check the records! Call the police! Someone actually verify the truth instead of believing lies!" A woman spat at my feet. The moisture hit the carpet inches from my shoe, a glob of contempt that drew gasps and a few nervous laughs. My daughter's camera captured it all. I ran. No dignity left to preserve. No point in measured retreat. I bolted for the doors, shoving through them into blinding sunlight. The steps blurred beneath my feet. I missed one, caught myself on the railing, kept moving. My car sat at the far end of the lot. I'd parked there deliberately, not wanting to block anyone in, still thinking like someone who belonged. Footsteps behind me, multiple sets, coordinated, gaining. I glanced back and saw 4 men from the congregation, not running, but walking fast, their faces set with purpose. Security, they'd probably call themselves. Protectors. My keys slipped in my shaking hands. The car door wouldn't open. The lock stuck, required a specific angle I couldn't manage with my fingers trembling. The men were 20 feet away. 15. The lock clicked. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door, punched the lock button. Fists hammered on the windows. Faces pressed against the glass, distorted by angle and pressure. Mouths moved, shouting words I couldn't hear over the blood roaring in my ears. The engine started. I reversed hard, tires squealing, forcing the men to jump back. One kicked my bumper as I passed, a hollow thump that rattled through the frame. I shifted to drive and accelerated toward the exit, checking the rearview mirror. The entire congregation had emptied onto the church steps. 200 people watching me flee, phones raised, documenting my defeat. My daughter stood at the front, still recording, her mouth moving in what might have been triumph or might have been narration for her viewers. Gerald stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. Pastoral comfort for the victim. Protection for the wounded lamb. I drove until the church disappeared behind trees and distance, then pulled into an empty gas station lot. My hands wouldn't release the steering wheel. My breath came in ragged gasps that bordered on hyperventilation. In my pocket, the threatening letter crinkled when I shifted position. The phone in my purse buzzed. Once, twice, a dozen times in rapid succession. Notifications cascading as videos went live, as my humiliation spread across networks and timelines, becoming permanent digital record. I sat in that gas station parking lot for 3 hours, watching the sun climb higher through my windshield. The phone eventually stopped buzzing. My hands eventually stopped shaking. The letter in my pocket became a weapon I finally understood how to use. The police station on Meridian Avenue had cream-colored walls and fluorescent lights that hummed with electrical persistence. I approached the front desk, where a uniformed woman with gray streaks in her pulled-back hair looked up from her computer screen. "I need to report criminal harassment and threats," I said, placing the letter on the counter between us. She pulled on latex gloves before touching the paper, spreading it flat to read. Her eyes moved across the words slowly, professionally. She reached for a form without looking away from the text. "When did you receive this?" "4 days ago, under my windshield wiper at work." She typed information into her system, fingers quick on the keyboard. "Any idea who might have sent it?" "Gerald Harrison, pastor at Living Waters Community Church on Fairfield Road." Her fingers paused. "That's a serious accusation. What makes you certain?" I pulled out my phone, opened my photos, showed her the screenshots I'd captured before my daughter could delete anything. Messages between her and Gerald, planning the church confrontation, discussing the letter, coordinating the ambush with precision that left digital footprints across multiple platforms. The officer's expression hardened as she scrolled through the evidence. She called someone named Davis from a back office, a man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a detective's badge clipped to his belt. He read everything twice, made notes in a leather portfolio, asked questions about dates and times and witnesses. "We'll need your daughter's contact information," Davis said. "These messages show conspiracy to commit harassment at minimum." I wrote the number on his form with steady hands. No hesitation. No maternal doubt bleeding through my pen strokes. The statement took 90 minutes to complete. Every detail documented, every threat cataloged, every witness named from the church parking lot confrontation. When I finished signing the last page, Davis assured me they'd contact Gerald Harrison within 24 hours. I drove to the newspaper office downtown, a brick building with Herald-Gazette carved into the stone above glass doors. Inside, the newsroom clattered with keyboard noise and phone conversations, journalists working in cubicles that spread across the open floor. I asked the receptionist for someone who handled investigative pieces. A woman approached 15 minutes later, maybe 35, with red-framed glasses and a notebook already in her hand. She introduced herself as Pamela Chen, gesturing toward a glass-walled conference room away from the main floor noise. "I have a story about a pastor using his position to orchestrate harassment campaigns against congregants," I said, sitting across from her at the conference table. Pamela's pen moved across her notebook as I talked, capturing details about Gerald's pattern of targeting women who questioned his authority, about financial irregularities in the church accounts that I'd noticed during my brief time volunteering in the office, about the coordinated attack using my daughter as his weapon. "Can you prove the financial issues?" she asked. I pulled out the folder I'd compiled over sleepless nights, photocopies of budget discrepancies I'd documented before being forced out of my volunteer position, donations that disappeared into discretionary accounts, building fund money redirected toward Gerald's personal expenses. She photographed every page with her phone, made notes about dates and amounts, asked for names of other church members who might corroborate the patterns I'd identified. "This'll take time to verify and cross-reference," Pamela said. "But if it checks out, we're looking at a major investigation. Churches don't usually get this kind of scrutiny." "He's counting on that," I said, counting on silence being easier than exposure. I left the newspaper office as afternoon shadows stretched across downtown streets. My phone showed 17 missed calls from my daughter, 23 text messages progressing from angry to desperate to threatening. I deleted them without reading past the preview lines. The storage facility on Highway 9 had units that smelled like dust and old cardboard. I rented a 10 by 10 space, paid for 3 months up front with cash. Over the next 4 hours, I moved everything essential from my apartment. Everything I couldn't risk losing if my daughter or Gerald's supporters decided escalation was their next move. Boxes of photographs and documents, my mother's china, the quilt my grandmother had sewn, books I'd collected over decades. Everything that mattered compressed into a space barely larger than a prison cell, secured behind a padlock and a rolling metal door. My apartment felt hollow when I returned, stripped of personality but still functional. If they came here now, they'd find nothing worth destroying. Nothing they could take that would break me. The lawyer's office appointment was scheduled for 9 the following morning. I'd already left the retainer deposit over the phone, already explained about restraining orders and defamation suits. Now I sat in my empty living room, watching darkness fill the windows, planning the next moves in a game I never wanted to play, but refused to lose. My daughter's face kept appearing in my mind, twisted with that performance of grief and accusation. I wondered when I'd lost her, what specific moment had transformed my child into someone else's weapon. But the wondering changed nothing. The grief changed nothing. Only action mattered now. The community garden plot stretched before me, black soil turned and ready for spring planting. 6 months had passed since the lawyer's letters went out, since the restraining order was filed, since I'd stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes for new attacks. My hands pressed seeds into the earth, each one placed with deliberate care, each row measured and marked with wooden stakes I'd painted white. The morning sun warmed my shoulders through the cotton shirt I wore. Sweat gathered at my temples as I worked the hoe between emerging seedlings, clearing space for roots to spread. 3 other gardeners worked nearby plots, their movements creating a rhythm of metal against soil, water splashing into watering cans, the occasional satisfied grunt when a stubborn weed finally surrendered. "Those tomatoes are going to be beautiful." The voice came from behind me. I turned to see Mrs. Patterson from the plot 2 rows over, her silver hair pulled back under a wide-brimmed hat, dirt staining her knees through worn jeans. "If the weather cooperates," I said. She stepped closer, examining my rows with the critical eye of someone who'd been growing vegetables for 50 years. Her fingers touched the soil, testing moisture levels, then she nodded approval before moving back to her own space. The church had quietly asked me to return 3 months ago. A formal letter, signed by the new pastor who'd replaced Gerald after his retirement, became suddenly necessary. I'd burned that letter in my kitchen sink, watched the paper curl and blacken, then washed the ashes down the drain. Some bridges stayed burned. My apartment had filled again with furniture purchased secondhand, with plants that thrived in the southern windows. With the sound of music, I chose myself without worrying who might judge the selection. The storage unit still held my mother's china and grandmother's quilt, but everything else had returned home, reclaimed and reorganized in ways that suited me now. The defamation settlement had come through after 4 months of legal maneuvering. Not enormous, but enough to cover my legal fees and provide a cushion that let me breathe easier. Gerald had fought it initially, then crumbled when his lawyer explained what discovery would reveal. The money transferred on a Tuesday morning, appearing in my account like vindication translated into digits. My daughter's number remained blocked on my phone. Sometimes I wondered if she'd tried to call, if regret had eventually penetrated the armor of her righteousness. But the wondering lasted only moments before I returned to whatever task occupied my hands. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. The mathematics of that equation required no further calculation. The cucumber seeds went into the ground next, planted in small mounds with 3 seeds each, spaced according to the instructions I'd studied online. Gardening was new territory, learned through YouTube videos and library books, through trial and error in borrowed soil. But the learning brought satisfaction that church committees and volunteer schedules never had. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled off my gloves, checked the screen. A text from Donna, a woman I'd met at the community center's book club, asking if I wanted to try the new Thai restaurant downtown on Friday. I typed back yes, added a smiley face, then tucked the phone away and returned to planting. The life I'd built in these 6 months felt smaller than before, but denser, more concentrated. Fewer people, but deeper connections. Less activity, but more meaning. I'd stopped performing for audiences that would never be satisfied, stopped contorting myself into shapes that pleased others, while crushing something essential inside me. The last row received pepper seeds, both bell and jalapeno, varieties I'd chosen because I liked them, not because they'd photograph well for social media or impress visitors. My garden would feed me, would give my hands productive work, would grow or fail based on my care and weather's whims, not on anyone's judgment or approval. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees, surveying the plot with its neat rows and careful spacing. In 3 months, this space would burst with green growth, with flowers turning to fruit, with abundance earned through consistent attention. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. The walk home took 20 minutes through neighborhoods I'd learned to appreciate without the filter of church gossip and social obligation. I noticed architecture now, the way morning light hits certain buildings, the sound of wind through different types of trees. Details that had been invisible when my mind was constantly processing social calculations and reputation management. My apartment welcomed me with silence that felt like peace rather than loneliness. I showered, scrubbing garden dirt from under my fingernails, then made lunch from ingredients I'd chosen at the farmer's market. The food tasted better somehow, more vibrant, as if freedom had flavors I was only beginning to recognize. The afternoon stretched ahead with no obligations, no performances required. I settled onto my couch with a book I'd been meaning to read for years. Let the story pull me in without checking the time or worrying about what I should be doing instead. Outside my window, birds sang in the magnolia tree, and somewhere distant, children played in a park. This was my life now, not the one I'd planned or the one my daughter had tried to destroy, but something new constructed from rubble and determination. It fit me better than anything I'd worn before. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.